I'm going to move on to Frances. She only has till 25 after to be with us, as she's having some of these similar conversations elsewhere. But she agreed to come on because we're trying to pull these conversations together. Frances is coming intentionally to attend Pathways to Hope and see those kind of social connections happening through that. And then opening up conversations among us that following Monday and Tuesday. So, Frances, let's just jump in. If you could tell us about the research you're working on now and how that involves San Antonio and the future.
I'm happy to, Anne. Thank you all for inviting me this morning. I'm really, really pleased to be with you. I just pulled some slides together just to keep my brain focused because I could go in all sorts of directions with this conversation. But please just unmute and stop me if you have a question. I'm happy to move into any questions that you have. So I'm with the Foundation for Social Connection. I lead their research and practice, but personally, I really started on the practice side. I went into teaching just outside Chicago. I taught fifth graders, but then learned that there were so many disparities in outcomes by race and income in this community. And so for about 10 years, I was just trying to figure out what was going on. And it really led me early on to discover that it was the connections and the just relationships that made all the difference with families, with students, and with teachers. And so I've just kept going in that direction with my work. I put my email address here and my phone number. Please use them for any reason. And so I wanted to just kind of ground us a little bit in what the foundation is about. And I know you all have been involved maybe with the action guide. And I want to say right up front that from the first time I met with Anne, I really understood how much your community has already done. You all are just so far down the road in this area. But the foundation's mission is to advance social connection nationwide. And everything we do is rooted in that evidence and the research so that we learn what is working, what isn't, and how to keep improving how people connect. This grant focus in particular is with the Gates Foundation, and it's in their Economic Mobility and Opportunity group. So what they are looking for is to understand what does it take in a community to dramatically increase mobility from poverty? What approaches actually work? And what does the evidence tell us could work? So first I'll go through a little bit of like what we've learned since October, working with experts and talking to communities. This next phase is about actually talking with community members and government leaders to understand what's already happening in your communities and also to look at what we're preparing as a roadmap and possible measurement indicators for communities to use. So something in all of this research that we have landed on is that social connectedness is a key predictor of upward mobility. That when people in a community have strong social ties, those people who have those ties have better outcomes, economic, but also other. And this, I'll tie it back to when I was teaching. What I discovered was as a family increased their network and felt an increased agency for themselves and their family and their community, the outcomes did change, at least in education. Their children did so much better, but it also affected so many other parts of their lives. We're also looking at how social infrastructure, so these connections that can be made in community spaces like parks, libraries, and other communal spaces, that these are places where these connections, the networks can be built across a community. And then also we're looking at this third piece that we're looking at what investments, financially and otherwise, that communities make in these spaces in particular. But what we hear from so many communities is that there's a lack of how to measure are these connections happening, and how do we measure how they affect someone's economic mobility and connectedness? So the approach we're taking with this grant is to develop, we're calling it a framework, but it ties into this roadmap that we are building that can support communities as they look to build social connection. We're really looking at local governments. Again, I'll tie it to the work that I used to do, that when a lot of this connection work, what I have found, doesn't include local government, that it just never fully realizes its potential. That a lot of times community members are working and maybe they're pushing their grassroots organizations, their associations and nonprofits, but if government isn't part of the mix, then it doesn't result in maybe policy changes, practices, and in understanding and the conversations I've had about compassionate cities, and how if you change even the approach, if it becomes a movement, and how everyone in a community joins in to approach work the same way, that it can have such a significant impact. So the 6 communities that we are working with are Baltimore, Hartford, San Antonio, Eureka Springs, Hennepin County, and Buncombe County in North Carolina. So we started with Asheville in North Carolina, but expanded to the county, especially after the effects of Hurricane Helene and bringing across this larger community in North Carolina. So as I mentioned before, part of this work is to understand what communities are already doing in these areas, these themes for this grant, and then talking about what we've learned. I'll bring up a graphic in a minute, but I think it helps to kind of talk a little bit about this theory of change and then see the graphic that has been evolving. So what we're talking about is, if local government focuses on this movement of social connectedness, and at the same time we have 4 quadrants that we're talking about, and they include investing in and supporting social and civic spaces where residents can meet and develop these networks, especially across socioeconomic status. And that ties into Raj Chetty's work that's kind of taken hold in the last 5 or so years. But also creating these processes that incorporate the voices of the community to shape decisions about their own lives. So a lot of times we talk about how relationships can form, or if you bring people into a space, that's already a big deal. But we're also pushing that there have to be intentional opportunities for people to actually get to know each other, because that's how we then care about each other, and care about the outcomes and the flourishing of other people's children and other families. We're also looking at building how communities build partnerships across sectors and community organizations. The research really shows, both in the communities we've been talking to and generally in research, that so much great work happens in communities, but in silos, unfortunately, a lot of times that the work is not joined together and aligned, and there's a great opportunity there in some communities. Also connecting this network, we can have all of these spaces, but by those spaces also joining together and forming relationships and aligning their work, that so much more can happen for the people in that community. And then finally, embedding social connection in the policies and practices across, and that goes back to like the compassionate movement. And so we're saying this is what we are finding, we're proposing can really increase economic mobility. And so here's our graphic showing that movement in the middle. But to go from, can communities make an investment? It's not always just financially, but it's that commitment as well. Community voice and empowerment, the cross-sector community partnerships, aligning policies, and then paying attention to building a social infrastructure, that's what can then lead us to measurable impact. And then finally, a piece that's very important to all of this are the common measures. A lot of times we hear, communities are using like third-party data by zip code or by county of economic mobility indicators. So, and those are great, but we're also looking at how can a community, if this is their desire, collect data on the ground about trust, belonging, connection. And so just to give you a few examples of that, we're looking at whether communities want to think it's feasible with support to connect more neighborhood level data about residents and how they feel. Do they have a voice in their community? Do they feel trust and belonging in their neighborhoods? Are they able to access the resources that are available in their community? We're also looking at, do these spaces that we're talking about have an opportunity to collect information, collect data easily about what it is that's happening in those spaces, and are people connecting, and are there programs that support community voice, empowerment, and connection? And then finally, for visitors from these facilities, at these spaces, can the space actually collect data from the people who visit those spaces? And so I just want to say that these two, what we've been looking at, what we're doing in these different locations, is that we've proposed just having two conversations. The conversations are really just about talking about these themes and about how communities work to build social connection. It's just conversation. We have one for local government officials that we're planning, and that can be just like 8 to 10 people. It can be as small or as large as a community wants. But the purpose is really to connect the people in that room. We always start there. To learn about the community, to talk to people who make these decisions about investments and about the various spaces in the community. And we want to show them the framework and talk about measures and just understand, do these make sense? What are the roadblocks? Are these realistic? Just to understand from each community what that could look like in a community, and if there's any desire. And then the second gathering is around bringing in more like association leaders, residents, nonprofit leaders, grassroots organizations, whoever, each community. We're tailoring each one of these visits to the community. And Ann and I have talked a lot about young people, that it would be great to have young people in the room talking about connection and how they connect with others in the community and what they need to really flourish and thrive in a community. And so at the end of this, what we're doing is in November, we'll publish, it will be public, it'll be on our website, what we've learned through this process, what we've learned in communities. And that would mean that, in San Antonio, you would have the chance to see it's a partnership. So what we learn in your community before it's ever published, of course. But we're thinking that what we learned can really help other communities across the country. And we're also hoping for this opportunity for these 6 communities to come back with gates and have funding for, if these communities would like to pilot this approach to do more work in this area and with the measurement tools. And so I'll stop sharing now. I hope that wasn't too much.
It was perfect. Just perfect. We always talk about going to at 20 after the hour and then opening up for some questions. And I know you have 5 minutes. One, I think we all recognize, Francis, how timely this is for San Antonio. San Antonio's like, in terms of poverty level, third among the top 10 most populous cities in the country. And it's very much a part not only of our conversation, but our work program and workforce program, as well as education. And I mean, it's a part of everything that we're doing, this conversation and what it would look like. It makes me think too of several different efforts, but we really have a strong one, pilot happening in southeast San Antonio, where on congregational property, where there is a facility, about how that group of people who are still there, but refitting into what they're calling the community of promise, and kind of refitting a congregation, in my mind, remembering that kind of space as a place for community to gather and be able to be exactly what you're talking about and develop and make those social connections. What have you seen that's come out? Well, I'm not going to talk. I want to ask if there are any questions because we only have 5 minutes. Alice, your hand is up.
Hi, this is phenomenal, the description that you gave. One, I want to say thank you because I saw where it said with food. And when you have food, that's one thing everybody needs and can get around. And we have a couple of funders that will let you use the funds for food. And it's just so important. And then as you were talking, sacred is if you know anything about sacred, is about connecting. It's the person facing to find the resources they need in and around where they are. But we also do convenings that are becoming very popular, very powerful, because it's the human interaction there. And as you were talking about everything else, I'm thinking about bringing it to the common language. So is there like any technical assistance or whatever? So when you take those big topics that are national, bring them to state, and they kind of morph a little, and then bring them to local, and they might morph a little. And how do you have a conversation? How do I have a conversation with my neighbor where we use that common language? Do y'all have any technical assistance around that?
I love that, Alice. Thank you. Yes, food, and as a former teacher, childcare. We always look childcare and transportation. Those are all significant, right? To think of what challenges people might face to get there. So to give you just like a little bit more background, I'm really grounded in community organizing and asset-based community development, which I think is kind of like this big term, just like so. I'm kind of like power to the people. What in each community, tailoring it to the people in that community. And with the organizing piece, I'm very grounded in Marshall Ganz's work. And so it's very much about storytelling. And so it's relational one-on-ones, just, person by person. How do we learn about each other's story so that that's how we start to care about others, and how people, I always go back to the classroom too. Does every child feel seen and understood and valued? And so it's like, if that's how we want each interaction to end up, then what are those components at their very basic human need kind of piece? And so that was with families too, with adults. And so that framework of public narrative then starts with story of self. So even in these conversations with many more people, exchanging stories and what are our hopes and dreams and possibilities, to then moving to what is the story of us in this room or in this community that we want for ourselves. And so just like, very at the very, very root of all of this, it's how can people feel their own power and leadership to move their community, every single person, no matter who they are in the community. So that's how I speak to it in the everyday.
Frances, you have found your people.
I feel it. I feel it coming through this.
Because we talk in those same terms that we're just doing large scale and small scale community organizing both at the same
Yes.
time. It's 8:26. Would you have time for one more question? Because
Absolutely.
Okay, Peter.
Yes.
And then we'll say thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Frances. I really appreciate the work. And yes, you're singing my song when you talk about empowerment and resiliency. And I have a question based upon your time frame for when you'll be hosting these sessions, because I'm working on it. It's a 9-month program with the city that's funded for economic development in corridors. It's a leadership program, and it's my portion of it. I've got a $10,000 grant to start for 3 months, and it's a project and doing a lot of that outreach and connectivity. We've already done a lot of the groundwork, but in October, we're going to have an empowerment and resiliency summit there in that corridor. So I'm just trying to kind of plug it in, see how it fits, and I really want to get on board with the work because it's just so in line with what's needed, capacity building in nonprofits, and all the way down to the economic community there as well. So
that's exciting, Peter. Yeah, that's very exciting. I think that when you're talking about your summit, what we really want to lift up to with this, final report also is about, we could highlight that. I'm sure, that could be in, something that is happening in San Antonio that is answering this exact type of work. We really want to showcase, like in a case study sort of thing, what are the interventions, what are the things that people are doing, groups are doing in each of these communities that are directly aligned, that make a difference, that have impact. So I think not just supporting that work in any way we can that you're doing, but also telling other communities across the country what it is you're doing.
I think maybe I also heard in there, like even previewing some of the research. Is that what I heard, Peter?
Yes.
That's what I kind of heard too, like what was coming out of the research can be a part of it.
Yes. So we have, and Anne, I know it's shared with you in the folder, but I can also send links, to share with the group. We've done a comprehensive literature review, landscape analysis, all of these things. We were able to bring together about 15 researchers, social psychologists, really powerful team. And so I'm happy to share all of that. It's just in Google spreadsheets with links that you can access any of this research. We're just pulling it together to share.
So it sounds to me like there could be, Peter, a conversation in that prep process. Do you have a date for that in October?
Yes, October is Quintana Empowerment and Resiliency Summit in October, the 25th.
Yeah, so it's towards the end, which is also good news. That gives the research more time to do its thing too. So good.
And Peter,
I'm going to honor and respect your time, Frances.
Thank you.
29 after,
and you're so great. Peter, I just want to say, Peter, please email me if you want to get on a Zoom call and talk more. I'd love to.
Yes, most definitely I will, Frances. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Frances, really. And we look forward, and I look forward to being with you and meeting you at the end of August, right here in San Antonio. Maybe we'll even set up a little, I don't know, lunchtime together during Pathways for anybody who wants to just informally get together. So I hope you have a great day. I'm inviting anybody else who wants to stay on and to go ahead and continue talking about it for about 15 minutes. So thank you, Frances.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Great meeting you all.